He got Dad's secretary pregnant and fired her. She ends up marrying the most powerful billionaire. Now he regrets it and begs for his son. Hello, lovely people. Welcome to Dr. Tom's Love Tales, your home to relax and enjoy the most touching love stories that will warm your heart and inspire your soul. I'm so grateful you've chosen to spend your precious time with me today, and I promise this journey will be worth every moment. I'm your host, Dr. Tom, and I'd really love to know where you're watching from today, whether you're in the US, England, South Africa, Australia, Canada, or anywhere else across this beautiful planet. Know that I'm truly glad to have you on today's video. If you're new here, quickly hit that subscribe button to join our family. And if you enjoy today's story, don't forget to like, comment your thoughts, and share with your friends. Let's begin with all my love. Chicago's skyline stretched endlessly against Lake Michigan, each glass tower reflecting the ambitions and ruthless dreams of those who dared to claim their place among the clouds. In the heart of this concrete jungle, where million-dollar deals were made over handshakes and destroyed with whispered rumors, stood the crown jewel of hospitality empires, Brennan Hotels. The Brennan name commanded respect across North America. 47 luxury properties bearing their signature gold and burgundy elegance dotted the continent from Vancouver to Miami, each one a testament to vision, determination, and the kind of old-fashioned business acumen that built dynasties. But behind every empire stands a single person who refused to accept limitations. And for Brennan Hotels, that person was Richard Brennan. At 62, Richard possessed the weathered hands of a man who had laid actual bricks in his youth, and the sharp eyes of someone who now moved billions with a phone call. His journey began 34 years earlier with a rundown property on Chicago's West Side, a building most investors would have condemned. Richard saw potential where others saw problems. He renovated that first hotel room by room, often sleeping on a cot in the basement while guests enjoyed luxury above his head. The loss of his wife Margaret to cancer 8 years prior had carved deep lines around his eyes, but it also intensified his focus on building something lasting. Richard worked 16-hour days not because he loved money, but because he understood legacy. Every acquisition, every renovation, every strategic partnership was another brick in the wall he was building around his family's future. Then there was Kimberly Reynolds, the young woman who would unknowingly become the center of a storm that would either strengthen that wall or bring it crashing down. At 24, Kimberly carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had earned every opportunity through merit rather than birthright. Her Northwestern University business degree hung in her small apartment next to a faded photo of her parents, her father in his factory uniform, her mother in hospital scrubs. These two hard-working people had sacrificed everything to give their daughter chances they never had. Growing up on Chicago's South Side had taught Kimberly that respect was earned, not given. While her classmates at Northwestern arrived in luxury cars funded by trust funds, Kimberly rode the bus and worked nights at a downtown diner to pay her tuition. She graduated summa cum laude, not because learning came easily, but because failure wasn't an option for someone whose parents had invested their dreams in her success. Her position as Richard's executive secretary came through what could only be called divine intervention. During a board meeting 18 months earlier, Richard had clutched his chest and collapsed to the conference room floor. While seasoned executives stood frozen in shock, Kimberly dropped to her knees and began CPR. Her mother's nursing background had required the whole family to learn life-saving techniques, and those skills now saved the life of Chicago's most powerful hotel magnate. Richard recovered completely, but he never forgot the young secretary who had acted while others hesitated. From that day forward, Kimberly became more than an employee. She became his most trusted advisor, the daughter he'd never had, and the only person in that 40-story tower who cared more about doing what was right than getting rich. She handled Richard's most sensitive correspondence, sat in on strategy meetings with senior executives, and possessed an intuitive understanding of the hospitality business that amazed industry veterans. When Richard needed someone to negotiate a difficult acquisition or smooth over a public relations crisis, he turned to Kimberly. Her insights were sharp, her integrity unquestionable, and her loyalty absolute. But every empire has its weak points, and for Richard Brennan, that weakness wore designer suits and bore his family name. Derek Brennan embodied everything wrong with inherited wealth. At 28, he possessed his father's striking features and his late mother's charming smile, but none of their substance. Where Richard had built his empire through sacrifice and vision, Derek had glided through life on charm and privilege. The Chicago social scene knew Derek well. He was a regular at exclusive clubs, charity galas, and high-end restaurants where he entertained a rotating cast of society women who were drawn to his family name and bank account. His relationships followed a predictable pattern: intense pursuit, expensive gifts, passionate affairs, and then boredom followed by callous abandonment. Derek had never worked a real day in his life. His business degree from an Ivy League university had been purchased rather than earned. His internships were honorary positions, and his current role as vice president of development was purely ceremonial. He attended meetings when it suited him, contributed little beyond his family name, and spent most of his time planning his next vacation or conquest. What grated on Derek most was watching his father's obvious preference for Kimberly's company and counsel. In Derek's mind, this secretary from the wrong side of town was stealing the attention and respect that belonged to him by birthright. Every time Richard praised Kimberly's work or sought her opinion on major decisions, Derek felt his own inadequacy reflected back at him. The tension between father and son had been building for years. Richard's disappointment in Derek's lifestyle was becoming increasingly obvious, while Derek's resentment toward his father's expectations grew more bitter with each passing month. Richard wanted a worthy heir. Derek wanted the benefits of inheritance without any of the responsibility. And caught between these two men stood Kimberly Reynolds, brilliant and naive, completely unaware that her competence was painting a target on her back. She saw Richard as a father figure and Derek as her employer's son, nothing more, nothing less. Her focus remained on her work, her gratitude for the opportunities she'd been given, and her determination to prove worthy of the trust Richard had placed in her. The stage was set for a collision that would destroy lives, topple an empire, and ultimately reveal that sometimes the person you underestimate becomes the very force that determines your fate. It started with stolen glances across the executive floor, those seemingly accidental encounters that Derek began engineering with the precision of a chess master. He would time his arrivals to coincide with Kimberly's morning coffee runs, appearing in the elevator just as the doors opened, flashing that million-dollar smile that had charmed Chicago's social elite for years. "Good morning, Kimberly," he would say, his voice carrying just the right note of warmth, mixed with professional respect. Another early day saving my father's empire. The first few encounters felt innocent enough. Derek would hold the elevator door, compliment her work on a recent acquisition, or make casual conversation about the weather. But gradually his comments became more personal, more pointed. "You know, Kimberly, I've been thinking," he said one Tuesday morning as they rode alone to the 42nd floor. "You're too brilliant to be just a secretary. With your mind for business and your natural leadership abilities, you should be running your own company someday." The compliment caught Kimberly off guard. She was accustomed to praise for her work, but Derek's words suggested he saw potential in her that went beyond her current role. "Thank you, Mr. Brennan. I'm grateful for the opportunities your father has given me. Please, call me Derek. And my father's lucky to have you. I just hope he realizes how extraordinary you are." These hallway conversations became more frequent, evolving from professional pleasantries to increasingly personal exchanges. Derek displayed an uncanny ability to find Kimberly during her lunch breaks, appearing in the building's cafe with perfectly timed casualness. "Mind if I join you?" he asked one afternoon, gesturing to the empty chair across from her small table. "I hate eating alone, and you always seem to have such interesting reading material." Kimberly glanced down at the business journal she'd been reviewing. "Just keeping up with industry trends. Nothing too exciting." "That's what I admire about you," Derek said, settling into his chair. "Most people our age are obsessed with social media and celebrity gossip. You're focused on substance, on building something meaningful. It's refreshing." The gifts started small. A first edition copy of a business leadership book appeared on Kimberly's desk with a handwritten note. Thought you might enjoy this. The author reminds me of you, brilliant and ahead of their time, Ninji." When Kimberly thanked him, Derek waved off her gratitude with practiced humility. "I saw it in a bookstore window, and immediately thought of our conversation about innovative management strategies. It seemed like something you'd appreciate." The presents escalated gradually. A delicate gold bracelet that matched her eyes, tickets to exclusive Chicago Symphony performances, weekend getaway packages to luxury resorts that Derek claimed were extras from business partnerships. Each gift came with the same casual explanation, as if Derek's generosity was simply natural overflow from his abundant lifestyle. "You work so hard, Kimberly. Everyone deserves a little beauty in their life," he would say, making each expensive gesture seem like simple kindness rather than calculated investment. The private dinners began under the guise of business discussions. Derek would approach Kimberly near closing time, looking slightly overwhelmed and vulnerable. "I hate to ask this, but would you mind joining me for dinner tonight? I'm supposed to review the quarterly reports for the West Coast properties, and you're the only person who really understands the numbers. I could use your insights." Kimberly found herself saying yes, partly from professional obligation and partly from growing curiosity about this side of Derek she'd never seen, the serious businessman seeking her expertise rather than relying on his family name. At Alinea, Chicago's most exclusive restaurant, Derek proved to be an attentive dinner companion. He asked thoughtful questions about her background, her dreams, her perspective on the hospitality industry. He listened intently to her responses, making her feel heard in a way she'd rarely experienced. But back in the modest apartment she shared with her best friend Jessica, Kimberly's growing feelings met with sharp skepticism. "Kim, wake up," Jessica said, pacing their small living room while Kimberly unpacked another expensive gift. "Rich men like Derek don't marry women like us. We're entertainment, not forever. You're setting yourself up for heartbreak." Kimberly bristled at her friend's cynicism. "You don't understand, Jess. Derek sees me differently. He values my mind, my insights. He's not like those other wealthy guys who only care about appearances. He loves that I'm real, that I've worked for everything I have." "And how exactly do you know what he loves?" Jessica pressed. "Because he tells you? Kim, these guys are experts at saying whatever women want to hear." "You're being unfair," Kimberly defended, her voice rising. "Derek's not some shallow playboy. You should hear how he talks about feeling disconnected from his father, about growing up feeling unloved despite all the money. He's vulnerable, Jess. He trusts me with things he doesn't share with anyone else." What Kimberly didn't realize was that Derek's vulnerability was his most potent weapon. During their intimate dinners, he would lean forward, his voice dropping to a confessional whisper as he shared carefully crafted stories about his lonely childhood. "You know, Kimberly, growing up with money isn't the blessing people think it is," he would say, his eyes reflecting practiced pain. "My father was always working, always building the business. I spent most of my childhood with nannies and tutors, wondering if anyone would ever love me for who I am, rather than what I represent." These revelations made Kimberly feel special, chosen to witness Derek's hidden depths. He painted himself as misunderstood, a sensitive soul trapped in a world of shallow expectations and family pressures. "I've never met anyone like you, Kimberly," he told her one evening as they walked along Navy Pier, the Chicago skyline glittering behind them. "You're not like those shallow society girls who only see dollar signs when they look at me. You're real. You see me." The emotional manipulation reached its crescendo during the annual company retreat to the Brennan Resort in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. The pristine lakefront property provided the perfect romantic backdrop for Derek's final move in his carefully planned seduction. On the retreat's second evening, Derek appeared at Kimberly's lakeside cabin with champagne and a picnic basket. "I thought we could watch the sunset together," he said, his smile warm and inviting. "Away from all the business talk and corporate politics. Just us." The evening unfolded like a scene from a romantic movie. Derek had arranged for a private spot on the dock, complete with soft blankets and flickering candles. The conversation flowed as smoothly as the champagne, moving from professional topics to personal dreams to increasingly intimate confessions. "I've been wanting to tell you something," Derek said as the last rays of sunlight painted the lake golden. "These past few months getting to know you have been the best of my life. You've changed everything for me, Kimberly. That night by the lake, she gave him everything. Her trust, her body, her future, believing with every fiber of her being that she was giving it to her soulmate. Have you ever been in a situation where someone you trusted completely betrayed that trust? Drop a comment and tell me, how did you recover? The months that followed Lake Geneva transformed Kimberly's life into a double existence she never could have anticipated. By day, she maintained her professional demeanor as Richard's trusted secretary, handling multi-million-dollar acquisitions and corporate negotiations with her usual competence. By night, she became Derek's secret lover, living for stolen moments in his penthouse apartment overlooking Lake Michigan. Derek's luxury downtown residence became their private sanctuary. The 40th floor apartment, with its floor-to-ceiling windows and modern minimalist design, felt like a world apart from the corporate tower where they maintained their professional facades. Here, behind locked doors and drawn curtains, Derek would transform from the casual heir apparent into an attentive lover who made Kimberly feel like the center of the universe. "I love having you here," Derek would whisper as they lay together on his Italian leather sofa, Chicago's skyline twinkling beyond the windows. "This place never felt like home until you started coming here." Their secret meetings followed carefully planned patterns. Derek would text Kimberly coded messages. "The Henderson project needs review tonight," and she would arrive at his building through the parking garage, avoiding the main lobby where doormen might remember her face. These clandestine arrangements made their relationship feel both thrilling and forbidden, adding an element of danger that intensified Kimberly's emotional attachment. Weekends brought elaborate escapes to remote locations where the Brennan name carried no recognition. Derek would charter private jets to secluded resorts in Colorado, California, or the Caribbean, always choosing destinations where they could walk hand in hand without fear of discovery by Chicago's elite social circles. "Someday we won't have to hide," Derek promised during a sunset dinner on a Napa Valley terrace. "But for now, I want to protect what we have." The business world is full of gossips and gold diggers who would try to destroy something this pure. Derek became her entire world. She lived for their stolen moments together, counting hours between their secret meetings, analyzing every text message for hidden declarations of love. Her modest apartment felt empty when she wasn't with him, and even Jessica's presence couldn't fill the void that Derek's absence created. The isolation from her normal life became complete. Kimberly stopped joining Jessica for their usual Friday night movies, declined invitations from college friends, and spent her free time shopping for outfits that would please Derek or researching topics she thought might interest him. Her world had narrowed to work, and Derek, with everything else fading into insignificance. "Once I straighten out some business deals, we'll tell my father together," Derek assured her during one of their intimate dinners. "He'll understand when he sees how happy you make me. You've brought out the best in me, Kimberly. Dad will see that." The promises about their future became Derek's favorite topic. He would spend hours describing their eventual wedding, a small, elegant ceremony overlooking Lake Michigan, and their life together as partners in both love and business. "You'll be the perfect wife for someone in my position," he would say. "Beautiful, intelligent, and you already understand the family business better than most board members." While Derek painted these beautiful fantasies, Kimberly's professional life reached new heights. She successfully negotiated 3 major hotel acquisitions for Richard, each deal worth tens of millions, and expanding the Brennan empire into new markets. Her expertise in contract negotiations and market analysis had become legendary within the company, with senior executives seeking her input on strategic decisions. The cruel irony wasn't lost on the universe. While Derek was lying to her about their future, she was securing his actual future through her brilliant work. Every successful deal she closed added millions to the Brennan fortune that Derek would eventually inherit, yet he remained oblivious to how his personal betrayal was being subsidized by her professional excellence. But secrets have a way of creating cracks in even the most carefully constructed facades. Jessica's warnings evolved from gentle concern to urgent alarm as she noticed changes in her best friend's behavior. "Kim, I saw Derek's photo in the Tribune's society section again," Jessica said one morning, holding up the newspaper's weekend edition. He was at the Children's Hospital charity gala with that blonde socialite. What's her name? Victoria something. The caption calls her his frequent companion. Kimberly's stomach clenched as she looked at the photo. Derek stood in formal attire beside a stunning blonde woman in an elegant gown, both smiling at the camera like the perfect power couple. It's business, Jess. Derek has to attend these events for family obligations. He explained this to me. Business. Jessica's voice rose with frustration. Kim, he's holding her hand in this photo, and look at how she's looking at him. That's not a business arrangement. When Kimberly confronted Derek about the photo, his explanation came smooth and practiced. Business obligations, darling. My father insists I maintain appearances at these charity functions, and Victoria's family has hotel properties on the West Coast. Sometimes I have to play the part of eligible bachelor for potential business partnerships. Soon we won't have to hide, and I won't need these ridiculous charades. But the society page appearances became more frequent, and Jessica's concerns grew more urgent. Kim, he's been photographed with different women at 5 events in the past 2 months. Either he's the busiest businessman in Chicago, or he's playing you. The stress of maintaining the secret relationship while excelling at work began taking its toll on Kimberly's health. She found herself exhausted by mid-afternoon, struggling to concentrate during important meetings, and feeling nauseous during her morning coffee routine. When her period was 2 weeks late, Kimberly initially attributed it to stress, but when the nausea persisted and her exhaustion deepened, a troubling possibility began forming in her mind. The pregnancy test sat on her bathroom counter for 20 minutes before she found the courage to look at the result. 2 pink lines stared back at her, confirming what her body had been trying to tell her for weeks. Congratulations, Miss Reynolds. You're about 10 weeks pregnant, Dr. Martinez confirmed during Kimberly's private appointment at a downtown clinic. Based on your symptoms and the blood work, everything appears normal and healthy. Kimberly left the clinic in a daze, her mind racing between panic and joy. A baby, Derek's baby, their baby, the secret that would change everything and finally give them the reason to reveal their relationship to the world. She spent that entire evening in her apartment, planning their future with the kind of detail that would have impressed even the most seasoned wedding coordinator. The baby would be born in early summer, perfect timing for Derek to establish his role as a father before taking on greater responsibilities in the family business. They would tell Richard together, presenting their love and their child as evidence of Derek's maturity and readiness for marriage. The nursery would be decorated in soft yellows and greens, gender-neutral colors that would work for either a son or daughter. She researched the best private schools in Chicago, calculated maternity leave schedules, and even sketched rough floor plans for the larger apartment they would need as a family. That night, as she fell asleep clutching the positive pregnancy test, Kimberly believed she was holding the key to everything she'd ever wanted. Derek's love, a family of her own, and security in the world she'd worked so hard to enter. She had no idea she was actually holding the weapon that would destroy her life. Thursday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that made Chicago feel alive with possibility. Kimberly woke before her alarm, her hand instinctively moving to her still flat stomach where their child was growing. Today would be the day she changed everything, the day she and Derek stepped out of the shadows and into their future together. She dressed carefully, choosing a navy blue dress that Derek had once complimented, and arrived at the Brennan Tower 30 minutes earlier than usual. The executive floors were still quiet, with only security guards and early arriving maintenance staff moving through the hallways. Kimberly wanted time to compose herself, to find the perfect words for the conversation that would transform Derek from secret lover to committed father and husband. As she stepped off the elevator on the 42nd floor, voices drifted from Richard's corner office. The door stood slightly ajar, unusual for this early hour, and Kimberly recognized Richard's distinctive baritone mixed with Derek's familiar laughter. But there was a third voice, a woman's voice, cultured and confident, speaking with the kind of polished accent that came from private schools and European finishing programs. Kimberly's footsteps slowed as she approached her desk, which sat just outside Richard's office. The conversation was clearly audible through the partially open door, and something in Derek's tone made her pause. He sounded different, more animated and enthusiastic than she'd heard him in months. "Derek, I'd like you to meet Victoria Ashford." Richard's voice carried clearly through the morning stillness. "Her family owns the largest hospitality chain on the West Coast. Ashford Hotels has been our biggest competitor for the past decade. But Victoria has a proposal that could benefit both our empires." Kimberly found herself frozen behind the conference room door, her heart pounding so loudly she was certain it would give away her presence. She pressed herself against the wall, knowing she should announce herself or retreat to her desk, but unable to move as the conversation continued. "It's such a pleasure to finally meet you, Derek," came the woman's voice, smooth as expensive wine. "I've heard so much about you from the business community. Your reputation precedes you." Derek's laugh was warm and genuine in a way that made Kimberly's stomach clench with recognition. "The pleasure is entirely mine, Victoria. You're even more beautiful than your photos in Forbes suggested, and brilliant too, from what my father tells me about your expansion strategies." "You flatter me," Victoria replied, but her tone suggested she was accustomed to such compliments. "I have to say, Derek, the merger our families are proposing makes perfect business sense, but I was hoping we might also find some personal compatibility. A union between the Brennan and Ashford families would create the most powerful hospitality empire in North America." The word union hit Kimberly like a physical blow. Her knees weakened, and she had to steady herself against the conference room wall. This had to be business. This had to be some kind of corporate merger discussion using formal language. Derek would never. "She's perfect, Dad." Derek's voice cut through her desperate rationalizations like a blade. "Intelligent, sophisticated, and her business acumen is legendary. When can we start planning the engagement?" The world tilted sideways. Kimberly's breath caught in her throat as Derek's words echoed in her mind. Engagement. The man who had promised her a future, who had made love to her just 3 nights ago while whispering about their life together, was discussing marriage to another woman with the enthusiasm of a child planning Christmas morning. "I was hoping you'd feel that way." Richard's voice carried obvious satisfaction. "The Ashford family is hosting a dinner party this Saturday. Consider it an unofficial announcement to Chicago's business community. Victoria, I think you'll find Derek to be everything you're looking for in a partner." "I'm certain I will," Victoria responded, and Kimberly could hear the smile in her voice. "Derek, perhaps we could have lunch today. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the merger details." "I'd be delighted," Derek replied immediately. "I know the perfect place, Gibson's. They have a private dining room where we can discuss everything freely." Kimberly's racing thoughts grasped desperately for explanations. This had to be business. This had to be some kind of elaborate corporate theater. Derek was probably playing a role to secure a merger, and later tonight he would explain everything while holding her in his arms and laughing about the ridiculous charade he'd been forced to perform. She forced herself to believe there was an explanation because the alternative was too devastating to accept. The pregnancy test in her purse suddenly felt like a lead weight, the joyful news she'd planned to share now seeming naive and foolish. The morning crawled by with agonizing slowness. Kimberly mechanically handled her usual tasks, screening Richard's calls, reviewing contract proposals, scheduling meetings, while her mind replayed the conversation she'd overheard. Every time her phone buzzed with a text message, she hoped it would be Derek explaining everything, but his silence stretched on until evening. By 6 o'clock, the executive floor had emptied except for Derek's office, where lights still glowed behind his closed door. Kimberly gathered her courage and the pregnancy test from her purse. Walking toward his office with legs that felt like they were moving through quicksand, she knocked softly and entered when Derek called out. He was standing by his window, still in his suit but with his tie loosened, looking every inch the successful businessman who'd just concluded a profitable day. "Derek, I have something wonderful to tell you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. He turned toward her, and for a moment his expression was unguarded. When he saw the small white stick in her trembling hands, his face underwent a transformation that would haunt Kimberly's dreams for years to come. The color drained from his features. His eyes widened with what looked like horror rather than joy, and he actually took a step backward as if she were holding a weapon instead of proof of their child. "Are you out of your mind?" The words erupted from Derek with venom she'd never heard in his voice. Do you think I'd throw away my engagement to Victoria for some secretary's fantasy? The casual cruelty of calling their child a fantasy hit Kimberly harder than a physical blow. Derek, what are you talking about? This is our baby, our future, our future. Derek's laugh was harsh and bitter. Kimberly, what we had was fun, but it was never real. You're my employee, nothing more. You're a secretary who got confused about her place in the world. But you said you loved me, Kimberly whispered, tears starting to stream down her face. You said we'd tell your father together. You said, I can say whatever I need to say to get what I want. Derek interrupted, his voice cold as winter wind off Lake Michigan. And what I wanted, I got. You were naive enough to believe that someone like me would actually marry someone like you. The words hit Kimberly like physical blows, each one stripping away another layer of the dreams she'd built around their relationship. Someone like you. Derek, I thought you were different. I thought you saw past all that superficial class nonsense. Different. Derek's expression was almost amused now, as if her pain was entertaining. Kimberly, I'm exactly what you should have expected. I'm a Brennan. We don't marry secretaries, no matter how talented they are in the bedroom. If you breathe a word of this to anyone, Derek continued, his voice dropping to a threatening whisper, I'll make sure you never work in this city again. My family has connections throughout Chicago's business community. One phone call from me, and you'll be unemployable. But you said we had a future, Kimberly pleaded desperately, still clinging to the hope that this was all some terrible misunderstanding. You said you wanted to marry me. Derek's final response shattered what remained of her heart. I love winning, Kimberly, and you were a conquest, nothing more. A challenge to see if I could get the Ice Princess secretary to melt. Mission accomplished. As Kimberly fled his office in tears, Derek was already calculating his next move. He couldn't risk her going to his father with the pregnancy claim. Richard's protective instincts toward Kimberly were well known throughout the company, and if she convinced him that Derek was the father, it could jeopardize everything: the merger, the engagement, his inheritance. Derek straightened his tie and walked down the hall to his father's office, where Richard was reviewing quarterly reports. Dad, I need to tell you something disturbing about Kimberly, Derek began, his voice heavy with feigned reluctance. She's been pursuing me relentlessly for months, making inappropriate advances and suggestions. I tried to handle it discreetly, but tonight she came to my office claiming to be pregnant and demanding that I marry her. Richard's head snapped up from his papers, his expression shifting from surprise to disbelief to growing anger. That's impossible. Kimberly isn't capable of such behavior. I wish that were true, Dad. Derek continued, his performance worthy of an Academy Award. She's been delusional about our professional relationship, interpreting my business courtesy as romantic interest. Now she's claiming pregnancy to try to force me into marriage and destroy my engagement to Victoria. I think she's having some kind of breakdown. As Derek spun his web of lies, painting Kimberly as a delusional gold digger, Richard's disappointment grew into fury. The woman he'd trusted like a daughter, who had saved his life and managed his most sensitive business affairs, was apparently trying to destroy his son's future through blackmail and false accusations. The trap was set, and Kimberly Reynolds, brilliant, loyal, and now pregnant with Derek's child, was about to discover that in the world of billionaire families, truth was whatever the most powerful person decided it should be. What would you do in Kimberly's position? Would you fight back or walk away? Let me know in the comments. Friday morning arrived with deceptive normalcy. Kimberly woke with swollen eyes from a sleepless night of crying, her body still reeling from Derek's brutal rejection and the pregnancy symptoms that served as constant reminders of her shattered dreams. She dressed mechanically in her usual professional attire, hoping against hope that yesterday's nightmare had been some terrible misunderstanding that daylight would resolve. The email notification chimed on her phone as she rode the bus to work. Mandatory all-staff meeting at 9 a.m. in the main conference hall. Attendance required for all employees. The message came from Richard's office, unusual for a Friday morning when most executives preferred to start their weekends early. Kimberly arrived at the Brennan Tower to find the lobby buzzing with confused employees. Clusters of secretaries, junior executives, and department heads whispered among themselves, speculating about the unexpected gathering. Several colleagues nodded politely to Kimberly as she joined the crowd heading toward the 42nd floor conference hall, their expressions friendly and unsuspecting. The massive conference room held nearly 200 employees, from entry-level staff to senior management. Kimberly found a seat in the middle section, surrounded by people she'd worked alongside for nearly 2 years. These were her colleagues, her professional family, people who respected her contributions to the company's success. Richard entered precisely at 9 o'clock, his expression grim and official. Derek followed behind him, looking appropriately somber for whatever announcement was about to devastate someone's career. Kimberly felt a flutter of hope. Perhaps Derek had confessed everything to his father, and this meeting was to announce their relationship and upcoming marriage. "Thank you all for gathering on short notice," Richard began, his voice carrying the authority that had built a hospitality empire. "I've called this meeting to address a serious matter that affects the integrity of our organization." Richard's eyes swept the room before settling on Kimberly with an expression she'd never seen before. Cold disappointment mixed with betrayal. Her stomach clenched as she realized this meeting wasn't about corporate policy or business announcements. Due to serious professional misconduct, Kimberly Reynolds is terminated effective immediately, Richard announced, his words echoing through the stunned silence of the conference hall. The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Heads turned toward Kimberly, who sat frozen in her chair as Richard continued his public destruction of her reputation. "Miss Reynolds has been engaging in inappropriate behavior toward a member of the Brennan family, attempting to seduce and blackmail my son Derek with false pregnancy claims in an effort to force marriage and gain access to family wealth." Richard's voice grew stronger with each accusation. "This kind of predatory behavior has no place in our organization." The words hit Kimberly like physical blows. False pregnancy claims, predatory behavior, blackmail. Each phrase painted her as exactly the kind of gold-digging manipulator she'd never been, turning her genuine love and real pregnancy into weapons being used to destroy her. Around her, colleagues who had respected her expertise and trusted her judgment now stared with expressions ranging from shock to disgust. The woman who had negotiated million-dollar deals and saved Richard's life was being publicly branded as a scheming seductress who had tried to trap his son. "Security will escort Miss Reynolds from the building immediately," Richard concluded. "Her access to all company systems and properties has been revoked. This meeting is concluded." 2 security guards appeared at Kimberly's side as the conference room remained deathly quiet. Every eye in the room watched as she stood on trembling legs, her face burning with humiliation. The pregnancy test from yesterday still sat in her purse, proof of a truth that had been twisted into lies. The walk through the building felt endless. Every step toward that exit felt like walking to her own execution. Former colleagues averted their eyes as she passed, some whispering behind their hands while others simply stared in shock. The woman who had entered this building as a respected executive was leaving as a disgraced pariah. On the executive floor, Derek stood by his office window, watching the scene below with satisfaction. From his elevated position, he could see Kimberly being escorted across the lobby like a criminal. His problem had been solved efficiently. His father's trust in Kimberly was destroyed. His engagement to Victoria remained secure, and any future claims about pregnancy or relationships would be dismissed as the desperate lies of a terminated employee. The elevator ride to the lobby stretched like an eternity. Kimberly stared at the floor numbers, watching them count down to her professional death. When the doors opened, she found herself facing a lobby full of employees who had witnessed her disgrace. The security guards flanked her as she walked toward the exit, her heels clicking against marble floors that had once felt like home. Outside, Chicago's autumn air hit her face like a slap of reality. The security guards handed her a box containing her personal items from her desk, a small collection of photos, a coffee mug, and a few books that represented 2 years of her professional life. They waited until she walked away from the building before returning inside, their job of removing the threat complete. Kimberly made it 3 blocks before collapsing onto a bus stop bench, sobbing uncontrollably as the magnitude of her destruction became clear. She'd lost her job, her reputation, her future, and the respect of everyone who mattered in her professional world. Worse, she was pregnant with the child of a man who had just publicly branded her a liar and a gold digger. The apartment she shared with Jessica had never felt smaller than it did that afternoon. Kimberly stumbled through the door, still clutching the box of her belongings, and collapsed onto their second-hand couch. Jessica took one look at her best friend's devastated face and said, "I told you so, Kim. I warned you this would happen." The words stung because they were true, but Jessica immediately regretted her harshness. Seeing Kimberly's complete breakdown, her expression softened, and she pulled her friend into her arms. "But you know what, Kim? This isn't your ending. This is your beginning. You're stronger than you know, and somehow, you're going to rise above this. I believe in you." The reality of exile set in quickly. Within days, Kimberly discovered that Derek's threats about making her unemployable weren't empty. Her applications to major Chicago firms were met with polite rejections or worse, no responses at all. The Brennan name carried enough weight to blacklist her from the hospitality industry entirely. Her savings account, never substantial to begin with, dwindled rapidly as pregnancy symptoms worsened. Morning sickness made it difficult to maintain regular schedules, while fatigue and emotional stress left her barely functional. Jessica's salary as a social worker couldn't support both of them indefinitely. Desperation drove Kimberly to accept whatever work she could find. She went from managing million-dollar deals to scrubbing toilets, but she never stopped fighting. Cleaning vacation rentals for cash became her lifeline, anonymous work that kept her fed and housed while she carried Derek's child. But during her final weeks at Brennan Hotels, while Derek was busy planning his betrayal, Kimberly had been quietly documenting something that would eventually prove more valuable than any job. Her access to Richard's confidential files had revealed a network of offshore accounts, questionable tax strategies, and money laundering operations that kept the Brennan empire artificially profitable. While Derek was destroying her reputation, she was gathering the ammunition that would eventually destroy his empire. Every forged document, every illegal transaction, every piece of evidence of the Brennan family's financial crimes now existed in a secure file that Kimberly had carefully assembled. The secretary they had thrown away like garbage was carrying secrets that could topple their kingdom. They just didn't know it yet. 8 months pregnant and struggling to breathe, Kimberly knelt on the bathroom floor of a lakefront vacation rental in Harbor Springs, Michigan. The luxury property overlooked Lake Michigan's pristine waters, a cruel reminder of the life she'd once touched but could never afford. Her hands shook as she scrubbed tile grout with a toothbrush, the only way to earn the $50 that would buy groceries for the week. The pregnancy had been brutal. Without proper prenatal care or adequate nutrition, her body was failing under the strain of growing a child while surviving on cleaning jobs that barely covered rent. Each morning brought new challenges: swollen feet that barely fit in her worn sneakers, back pain that made bending over toilets agony, and a persistent exhaustion that no amount of rest could cure. Jessica had begged her to move back to Chicago, to swallow her pride and ask for help. But Kimberly couldn't bear the thought of facing the city where Derek's lies had destroyed her reputation. Here in Michigan's vacation rental market, she was anonymous, just another invisible worker cleaning up after wealthy tourists. The thunderstorm arrived without warning, turning the afternoon sky black as midnight. Kimberly had finished cleaning the rental's interior and was walking toward her battered Honda Civic when the first wave of dizziness hit. She leaned against the car's hood, waiting for the world to stop spinning, but her vision began tunneling into darkness. The beach was only 50 yards away, and for some reason, her feet carried her toward the water instead of her car. Maybe it was the need for fresh air, or maybe her body was simply giving up after months of pushing beyond its limits. The rain began falling in heavy drops as she stumbled across the sand. The collapse came suddenly. One moment Kimberly was walking, and the next she was on her hands and knees in the wet sand, her pregnant belly making it impossible to get back up. The storm unleashed its full fury, soaking her clothes and making the beach treacherous with lightning strikes illuminating the churning lake. "Someone help her," a voice shouted through the rain. Strong arms lifted Kimberly from the sand as thunder crashed overhead. Through her semi-conscious haze, she felt herself being carried toward shelter, her rescuer's voice calm and authoritative as he spoke into a phone. I need paramedics at 2847 Lakeshore Drive immediately. Pregnant woman, appears to be in distress, possibly dehydrated or malnourished. The voice belonged to Gabriel Santos, though Kimberly wouldn't learn his name until later. At 34, Gabriel possessed the lean build and weathered hands of someone who had worked his way up from nothing. His renewable energy empire, Santos Energy, had started in a Detroit garage where he'd built his first solar panel from salvaged materials. Unlike Derek's inherited fortune, Gabriel's wealth came from intelligence, determination, and an absolute refusal to accept limitations. He'd grown up in Detroit's most dangerous neighborhoods, the son of a single mother who cleaned office buildings to pay rent. That background gave him an instinctive recognition of genuine struggle when he saw it. "When did you last eat a real meal?" Gabriel asked as paramedics checked Kimberly's vital signs in the rental property's living room. Kimberly tried to remember. Yesterday, I think. Maybe the day before." The admission broke Gabriel's heart. He'd seen poverty up close, had lived it himself, but watching a pregnant woman collapse from hunger in a country of plenty ignited something protective in his nature. As the paramedics confirmed that both Kimberly and her baby were stable but severely undernourished, Gabriel made a decision that would change both their lives. He stayed with her through the emergency room visit, ensuring she received proper care while learning her story in careful pieces. "I used to work in business," Kimberly explained weakly from her hospital bed. "But things went wrong, and now I clean vacation rentals to survive." Gabriel heard what she wasn't saying. The shame in her voice, the careful way she avoided details, the obvious intelligence behind her exhaustion. He'd built his empire by recognizing talent wherever it appeared. And something about this woman intrigued him beyond simple compassion. "I don't care about your past," Gabriel said when the doctors confirmed Kimberly could be discharged. "I care about your potential. I run an energy company, and I need someone to manage our Chicago operations. The job comes with full health insurance, housing assistance, and a salary that will ensure you never collapse from hunger again." Kimberly stared at this stranger who was offering her salvation without asking for her history or demanding explanations. "You don't know anything about me. I could be anyone. You're someone who was working until the moment your body gave out," Gabriel replied. "You're someone who didn't ask for help even when you were desperate. Those qualities tell me more than any resume could." Unlike Derek, Gabriel saw her worth before he saw her vulnerability. Where Derek had exploited her inexperience and trust, Gabriel offered genuine opportunity based on potential rather than possession. The Chicago offices of Santos Energy occupied 3 floors of a sleek downtown building, a world away from the Brennan Tower where Kimberly's dreams had died. Gabriel personally handled her training, teaching her the renewable energy business with the patience of someone who remembered his own learning curve. "Solar technology isn't just about panels and batteries," Gabriel explained during one of their daily strategy sessions. "It's about understanding power grids, municipal regulations, financing structures, and consumer psychology. You need to think like an engineer, a lawyer, a banker, and a salesperson all at once." Kimberly absorbed the knowledge like a desert drinking rain. Her business education provided the foundation, but her analytical mind grasped the complexities of renewable energy markets with startling speed. Within weeks, she was identifying inefficiencies in their supply chain and suggesting improvements to their customer acquisition strategies. Gabriel watched her transformation with amazement. The exhausted, broken woman he'd found on a Michigan beach was evolving into a business strategist whose insights rivaled those of industry veterans. Her rapid mastery of renewable technology markets proved what he'd suspected. Her intelligence had been wasted in her previous role. What Derek had tried to destroy, Gabriel helped rebuild stronger than before, became Kimberly's private mantra as her confidence returned. Every successful negotiation, every problem solved, every client satisfied, was proof that her worth hadn't been diminished by Derek's betrayal. Professional respect gradually evolved into personal connection. Gabriel never pushed, never presumed, never made Kimberly feel obligated beyond their business relationship. But he was present for every milestone: the first successful quarter she managed, the major contract she negotiated, the day she moved into her own apartment with company assistance. When labor began 2 weeks early, Gabriel was the one who drove Kimberly to the hospital at 3 in the morning. He paced the waiting room during her 18-hour delivery, fielding calls from worried clients while ensuring she had everything she needed. The moment baby James entered the world, Gabriel was there, not as an obligation or duty, but as someone who had chosen to care about this woman and her child. "Can I adopt him?" Gabriel asked softly as he held the sleeping infant. "I want to be his father in every way that matters, not because you need rescuing, but because I want to be part of his life." Kimberly looked at this man who had saved her life, rebuilt her career, and now wanted to claim her son as his own. Gabriel wasn't offering charity or expecting gratitude. He was asking to build a family together. 6 months later, as Kimberly's leadership of the Chicago operations exceeded every performance metric, Gabriel proposed in the conference room where they'd planned their most successful campaigns. "Marry me not because you need me, but because we're better together," he said, offering a ring that sparkled with promise rather than possession. "I love who you are, who you're becoming, and who we could be as partners in everything." Kimberly said yes, not from desperation or gratitude, but from genuine love for the man who had seen her potential when she couldn't see it herself. 3 years after Kimberly's humiliating exile from the Brennan Tower, Santos Energy announced its most ambitious acquisition target yet, the entire Brennan Hotel empire. The news sent shockwaves through Chicago's business community, where the Brennan name had been synonymous with hospitality dominance for over 3 decades. Gabriel Santos stood before the press in the same conference room where Richard Brennan had once announced Kimberly's termination. But this time the woman beside him wasn't a disgraced secretary. She was Kimberly Santos, Chief Operating Officer of Santos Energy, and the brilliant strategist behind their hostile takeover bid. "The hospitality industry is ripe for sustainable transformation," Gabriel announced to the assembled reporters. "Santos Energy intends to convert the Brennan Hotel chain into the world's first fully renewable luxury hospitality network. My wife, Kimberly Santos, will be leading these acquisition negotiations personally." The transformation was stunning. Gone was the uncertain young woman who had once cleaned Derek's penthouse apartment. In her place stood a confident executive in a tailored charcoal suit, her wedding ring catching the light as she outlined their acquisition strategy with the precision of a master chess player. What the Brennan family didn't know was that Kimberly possessed something more valuable than Santos Energy's billions: detailed documentation of Richard's financial crimes that she had quietly compiled during her final weeks of employment. The offshore accounts, the laundered money, the tax evasion schemes that had kept the Brennan empire profitable were all meticulously recorded in files that federal investigators would find fascinating. "Our due diligence process has revealed certain financial irregularities within the Brennan organization," Kimberly announced calmly. "These concerns have been forwarded to the appropriate federal authorities for investigation." In his luxury office 40 floors above, Richard Brennan watched the press conference with growing horror. The woman he had publicly destroyed was now dismantling his empire with surgical precision, armed with evidence he didn't even realize she possessed. The FBI raids began at dawn. Federal agents swarmed every Brennan property, seizing computers, files, and financial records while stunned employees watched their workplace transform into a crime scene. Richard's personal office became the center of a money laundering investigation that would dominate Chicago headlines for months. Derek Brennan woke to federal agents pounding on his penthouse door, armed with warrants to search his home and freeze his assets. The man who had once casually destroyed Kimberly's life now faced potential prison time for his complicity in his father's crimes. The acquisition announcement gala took place in the ballroom of Chicago's most exclusive hotel, a property that Santos Energy now owned through emergency federal auction. Kimberly entered wearing a stunning emerald gown that complemented her wedding ring, her husband Gabriel at her side and their son James playing quietly nearby. The 3-year-old boy bore no resemblance to Derek Brennan. His dark hair and intelligent eyes came from his mother, while his confident demeanor reflected the loving environment Gabriel had provided. To anyone watching, James Santos was clearly his father's son in every way that mattered. Derek spotted Kimberly across the crowded ballroom and froze. The woman he remembered vulnerable, heartbroken, desperate, had been replaced by someone radiating power and success. She moved through the crowd with the confidence of someone who belonged in elite circles, accepting congratulations on her company's acquisition with gracious professionalism. When Derek finally approached, his hands were visibly shaking. "Kimberly, I hardly recognized you." She turned toward him with the polite smile she reserved for business acquaintances. "I'm sorry, do we know each other? I'm Mrs. Santos, Chief Operating Officer of Santos Energy." The deliberate dismissal cut deeper than any angry confrontation could have. Derek was being treated like a stranger by the woman who had once loved him desperately enough to plan their entire future together. "Please, Kimberly," Derek whispered desperately. "We need to talk about the boy, about what happened between us." "The boy?" Kimberly's expression remained professionally pleasant. "I'm not sure what you mean. This is my son James Santos. His father is right over there handling negotiations with the mayor's office." Derek's eyes followed her gesture to where Gabriel stood talking with city officials, occasionally glancing over at his wife and son with obvious affection. The family unit was complete without him, had always been complete without him. "But he's my son too," Derek insisted, his voice breaking with desperation. "Biologically, I mean, I have rights." Kimberly's smile never wavered, but her voice carried the steel of someone who had survived betrayal and emerged stronger. "My son already has a father, the man who chose us when it mattered, the man who was present for his birth, his first steps, his first words, the man who legally adopted him and gave him a name to be proud of. You can't just erase me from his life," Derek pleaded. "I didn't erase you," Kimberly replied calmly. "You erased yourself. You chose your reputation over your child. Gabriel chose love over everything else." The final victory came in the form of Derek's employment offer. With the Brennan Hotel empire dissolved and his family's assets frozen pending federal investigation, Derek faced unemployment for the first time in his privileged life. His only option was accepting a middle management position with Santos Energy, working for the woman he had betrayed. "The irony is delicious, isn't it?" Gabriel observed privately to his wife as they watched Derek clean out his father's former office. The secretary he threw away had become the CEO he now answers to. Richard Brennan's federal custody came with a moment of devastating clarity. Sitting in a holding cell facing decades in prison for financial crimes, he finally understood the magnitude of his mistake. The woman he had publicly humiliated based on his son's lies had been the one person who could have saved them all. Kimberly's evidence had been so comprehensive, so damaging that federal prosecutors offered Derek a plea deal in exchange for his cooperation. He would avoid prison time but forfeit any claim to his father's empire and accept supervised employment with Santos Energy. The morning Derek reported for his first day of work under Kimberly's authority, she was already in the conference room reviewing quarterly reports. She looked up as he entered, her expression professional and distant. "Good morning, Derek. Welcome to Santos Energy. Your supervisor will show you to your cubicle and explain your duties in our customer service department." A cubicle. Derek Brennan, heir to a hotel empire, would be answering phones and processing complaints in a shared workspace. The woman he had once called just a secretary now decided his daily schedule, his responsibilities, and his professional future. "I know you probably hate me," Derek said quietly. Kimberly considered this for a moment before responding. "Hate requires caring, Derek. And I stopped caring about you the moment you called our child a fantasy." She returned to her reports, dismissing him with the casual indifference he had once shown her. Derek Brennan had become irrelevant to the life he had tried to destroy, a bitter lesson in the power of choices and the price of cruelty. The kingdom he thought he would inherit now belonged to the woman he had thrown away like garbage. And every day as he watched his son call another man Papa, in the halls where he had once ruled, Derek understood that some victories come too late to matter. Family, if you're already enjoying this incredible journey together, don't forget to subscribe. 5 years after the acquisition, the Santos Empire had transformed the hospitality industry beyond recognition. What began as a hostile takeover of the Brennan hotel chain had evolved into a global network of sustainable luxury properties that set new standards for environmental responsibility and ethical business practices. Kimberly and Gabriel built their dynasty together, each bringing unique strengths to their partnership. Gabriel's technological innovations in renewable energy merged seamlessly with Kimberly's operational expertise, creating hotels that were both profitable and environmentally revolutionary. Their marriage was more than romantic. It was a true business partnership where mutual respect and shared values created success that neither could have achieved alone. Their son James, now 8 years old, grew up in boardrooms and hotel lobbies, absorbing lessons about leadership and integrity from parents who had earned their success through merit rather than inheritance. He spoke 3 languages, understood solar panel efficiency ratings, and possessed an intuitive grasp of hospitality management that amazed industry veterans. "Both of my parents chose me," James would tell curious classmates when they asked about his family structure. There was no confusion in his young mind about his identity. He was a Santos, son of 2 people who had built something meaningful together. The Santos name became synonymous with ethical business practices. Their hotels employed living wages, promoted from within based on merit, and maintained strict codes of conduct that prevented the kind of exploitation that had destroyed other empires. Industry publications regularly featured Kimberly as an example of principled leadership, though she never publicly discussed the experiences that had shaped her values. Derek Brennan's daily existence served as a constant reminder of choices and consequences. Each morning he arrived at the Santos Energy Customer Service Center, wearing the same expression of quiet defeat that had become his permanent mask. His cubicle sat directly below a large photograph of the company's leadership team, Gabriel, Kimberly, and James, a family portrait that haunted his peripheral vision throughout each workday. The cruelest moments came when James visited the office with his mother. The boy would race through the hallways, greeting employees by name and sharing stories about school or family vacations. When he passed Derek's workstation, James would nod politely to the man he knew only as one of Mom's employees. Completely unaware of any biological connection, Derek watched his son call another man Dad with genuine affection, witnessed the easy camaraderie between James and Gabriel, and understood too late what he had thrown away. Not just a child, but the love of a woman who would have built a life with him based on truth rather than lies. His attempts to rebuild his social standing had failed completely. Chicago's elite circles, once eager to associate with Brennan wealth, now viewed Derek as toxic, a reminder of federal investigations and financial scandals. His dating life consisted of awkward encounters with women who knew his history and saw him as either a cautionary tale or a temporary source of entertainment. Richard Brennan's 10-year prison sentence provided unexpected opportunities for self-reflection. Stripped of wealth, power, and the constant demands of maintaining an empire, he finally had time to examine the choices that had led to his downfall. In his cell at the Federal Correctional Facility, Richard wrote letter after letter to Kimberly, apologies that would never be sent, explanations that came years too late, and acknowledgments of her worth that should have been expressed when they could have mattered. "I know now that you were the daughter I never deserved," he wrote in one unsent letter. "Your integrity, your loyalty, your brilliance, I threw it all away because I believed my son's lies without question. You saved my life once, and I repaid that gift by destroying yours. The woman I treated as family became my enemy because I failed to see the truth about my own son." The redemption he sought would remain forever beyond reach, locked away with the years he would never recover and the relationships he could never repair. My family, Kimberly's story teaches us that sometimes the people who hurt us the most do us the greatest favor. They force us to discover strength we never knew we had. They push us toward destinies we never would have chosen but were always meant to live. Every betrayal is a redirection. Every closed door is preparation for the right door. And sometimes the person who throws you away is just making room for the person who will treasure you forever. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Remember, your story isn't over. Your greatest chapter might be the one you're writing right now. Until next time, keep believing in the power of your own resurrection.